Oh. 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 Hariom, and greetings from Niagara Falls. A new term that is popular with Urban Dictionary and BuzzFeed and Twitter trends is self-care. I'm going to read to you a message, which I've already read. I'm reading it again in reference to differences in self-care. One is external, one is internal. I'll start reading. Listen carefully. You analyze what you feel is self-care. True self-care is not salt baths and chocolate cake. It is making the choice to build a life you don't need to regularly escape from. And that often takes doing the things you least want to do. In our society, the term self-care is bounced around a lot with recommended activities like coloring, drinking tea, and calling a friend, etc. Inherently, there's nothing wrong with this. After all, the intention of investing in oneself is noble and necessary, for when we have the right relationship with ourselves, we can care for others and our earth in an equally loving way. However, with more honesty, one might observe that the term self-care is often misunderstood and used as a disguise for validating indulgences or escapism. If we want to care for ourselves in a nourishing, lasting, uplifting way, we must shift our vision of self-care from short-term pleasures to long-term practices. True self-care is made up of small, achievable habits that bring calmness to the body, quietness to the mind, and stillness to the intellect. This month, introspect on your self-care practices, and with Viveka, assess what they are feeding, the senses or the self. In the spirit of Deepavali, recommit to one practice that you know is good for you, that you've been holding yourself back from, like writing or japa. Dedicate yourself to this daily and reflect on how you feel come December. This is a message that I write for our Chinmaya Yuvakendra West e-newsletter. Because my observation with self-care is what we're doing is temporary. Our self-care is not caring for ourselves in an authentic and deep way. Conversely, what we do together in this community, particularly with such wellness workshops, wellness programs, is we care for ourselves in an authentic and deep way. The Sanskrit word for wellness is swasti. Su asti. It is not just about asti, being, living, but su asti, well-being, joyous living. Humans, more so than animals, are social creatures. We all like to interact. We all like to socialize. If you reflect on the biggest corporations in history, they are corporations that facilitate socializing. Agreed? And since March of 2020, our socializing has been inhibited. We are studying from home. We are working from home. We're serving from home. With such closeness in reference to the people that we live with. They could be our parents. They could be our cousins. They could be a roommate. With such closeness, there is going to be conflict. Just think of a sport like cricket. Many of you are cricket fans. There's no conflict between the players on the field physically. But if you take a smaller arena, like ice hockey, there's always conflict with players. They're always bumping into each other, correct? If you can't relate to that sports example, think about Indian cities. In terms of the roads and sidewalks, there's so many people, so there's so much physical contact or conflict. Where there is more conflict, there must be more compassion. And we've not been trained in this. In terms of what the coronavirus done, we certainly know that millions have been affected physically. My observation is that billions have been affected mentally, based on the factors that I've just described. Now, fast forward 21 months later, some of us are still studying from home, working from home, serving from home. In a micro sense, Thanksgiving is coming up for most Americans. So there's going to be even more closeness, more conflict. The theme of our workshop this evening, this month, is on how to infuse this conflict with compassion, how to nurture trust, how to nurture the sense of family. I will speak for 5-ish more minutes, orienting us towards this focus. Then I'm going to start to address some of the questions that you've shared in our WhatsApp group. This has been emailed to me, some of the questions. There's too many, but I'll start to share thoughts on what you've been thinking about. Then we'll have a discussion and we'll all go to sleep on time. Living with people is challenging. And I distinctly remember what Pujya Swami Tejomayananda shared with us students when we were studying under him in a very controlled environment. In chapter 6, verse 9 of Bhagavad Gita, Pujya Swami Tejomayananda said, this is the best shloka for living with beings. Now think about how many verses you know from the Upanishad, from the Ramayana, and he overtly stated, and I'm looking at my notes right now, best shloka for living with beings. I'm going to read this out to you. I will explain it simply, but this is a verse for you to reflect on. Trust in family is not going to be built in 30 minutes, okay? Reflection is needed. Suhrin mityarudasina madhyastadvesha bandhushu sadhushvapi cha papeshu samabuddhir vishishyate. Vishishyate. The one who excels, the one who is the greatest, samabuddhi, they are balanced. Their body is calm, their mind is quiet, their intellect is still. With whom? 9 different types of personalities are shared in this one verse. And the word cha, which means and, really means etc. Here are 9 dominant ones. And then the etc. is there's different combinations and permutations of these 9. I'm going to go through these in the order that Shri Krishna has shared. As I share these, I want you to think about who you are. Who you are in reference to, let's say, your parent, your employer, your significant other. Think of this from your narrative, not their narrative. Here we go. Suhrit. Suhrit means the one who is large-hearted. This can be seen, the one who has little to no expectations of you. That's who a suhrit is. Next, mitra. Mitra is one who's affectionate by choice. Some have to be affectionate because they want something back or they've done something wrong. A mitra is one who's affectionate by choice. Ari. Ari means enemy. It is one who torments you constantly. And what's powerful about this, I don't think any human torments us constantly, but social media does. Yes? Our own minds do. Udasina, that's number 4. Udasina is one who is indifferent. If you win, that's fine. If you lose, that's fine too. Definitely some of your family members have that relationship with you in reference to self-development, correct? You attend this workshop, that's fine. You don't attend this workshop, that's fine also. Number 5, madhyastha. Madhyastha is a well-wisher on both sides. Suppose my sister and I are getting into a disagreement. A well-wisher will wish well for both of us. Next, dvesha. A dvesha is one who is vengeful. You know, like in the movie The Revenant, that's dvesha. Someone who is causing harm because you harmed them. That is different than an enemy. An enemy who is one who torments constantly for no reason. Then bandhu. A bandhu is a relative. More specifically, one who is affectionate because they have to be. That's the difference between mitra and bandhu. Mitra by choice, bandhu not by choice. Sadhu. A sadhu is actually the top of this list in terms of the greatest, in terms of the easiest to live with. It is a sadhu. A sadhu is one who follows the scriptures. In other words, someone who's trying to be a better person. In so many workshops I've shared with all of you, the relationship that facilitates, the virtue that facilitates relationships is adaptability. A sadhu is one who is adaptable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 is papi. A papi is the lowest on this list. They're the most difficult to live with, to try to be joyous with. They're ones who don't follow the scriptures. In other words, they're not adaptable. They're the ones who feel, this is who I am. And there's no feeling or investment in change. I'm sharing this with you because if you analyze all of your relationships, You are one of these to someone else. Sometimes a sadhu, sometimes a bandhu, sometimes a suhrit. And the implication here is to be balanced. When you are in a relationship, you adapt to that relationship. Vices and virtues are unilateral. If I offend you and I ask for forgiveness and you give this to me, very good. And if you don't give this to me, very good, because I have no control over your forgiveness. This is unilateral, and that's why I keep stating, analyze your relationship with others. This is your narrative. Who are you to others? And the necessity to adapt or be compassionate with others. If I can summarize this into 3 practices. For those relationships where you are with someone who's older than you, and maybe biological age doesn't matter so much, so I'll re-describe it too. When you're with someone who's more mature than you, they use words like mature. You should listen to them. The practice with those who are more mature than you, listen to them. If we all think of our parents, what do our parents want most from us right now? They want us to listen to them. They want us to give time to them. Agreed? I remember Pujaswami Tejo Mahinanda's joke. How do you know that you're old? When you have the answers to everything, but nobody ever asks you. So listen, in terms of those who are of an equal maturity to you, or the same demographic age as you, lead. How to relate to them, how to trust yourself, how can you get them to trust you? Lead yourself. If you think of your role models, they're ones you can relate to, correct? Do any of you have animals as role models? That raccoon that comes into our garage, he's awesome. One day, when I grow up, I hope to be a raccoon. It is only those you can relate to, and those who are younger than you, those who are more immature. So now you're thinking, okay, everyone, fine, it is to love them. That's much harder, correct? But those who are less mature than you, your practice is to love them. Okay? So I'm rewinding, and then I'm going to get into your observations. Where there is more conflict, there has to be more compassion. Virtues are unilateral. You cannot force another person to be virtuous or vicious. It is your narrative. It is your relationship with others. And every relationship is different. In one verse, that is 2 lines, Bhagavan Krishna enumerates 10 of them. And in a simple framework, when I'm interacting with my parents who are more mature than me, I should listen to them. That doesn't mean I have to follow them. All of you listen to me, you don't follow me. So there is a difference between listening and following. Listening is, one is adapting to that relationship. With those of the same maturity, leading. I have found interacting with our youth and our young adults and our evolving adults, some of the most powerful teachings for relationship building was while playing soccer. Why? Because that's where one's mind is. They think of a teacher as being an older person that they don't know what they're talking about. But when you score a goal on someone, all of a sudden, there's far more of that relatability. So lead yourself. And for those who are younger, love. And a fine practice in love is to accept someone and not expect them to become more mature. With those initial reflections, and all of this needs to be reflected on more, I'm going to start going through some of the observations you've been sharing in our WhatsApp group. The first topic of interest that has been shared is communication. I'm going to take the first point. I know one area I've struggled with is having truly open and honest communication and dialogue with my parents. Even as a grown adult, I find myself protecting them from difficult news about life events, my health, challenges, etc., because I don't want to worry or scare them. Before I share my observations, how many of you can relate to this sentiment by show of hands? I have my hand up too. You tell me, what would you do if you're experiencing this? Share this in the chat. We are a community. We're seeking together. What do you do when you have this feeling? Reflect on what you're going to share in advance. Write to them. Speak to them when no one is emotional. These are all fine sentiments. For each of these points, I will give a higher observation and a lower observation. My higher observation is, if you can express to your parents, not just in words, how you are independent, they will become much more open, much more vulnerable, much less worried about you. If you think of anyone you care about, finally you want them to be independent, correct? Even independent of you. That's the greatest gift we can give to our parents or someone can give to us. And so we have to express that, but you can't just fake it. You actually have to practice becoming more independent, academically, financially, socially. I think about my circumstance with my two sisters. Both of my sisters, in a secular sense, they're both employed and they're both doing fine in their secular life. I'm unemployed and I'm not doing fine with my secular life. However, I know that my parents worry less about me. And that's what I can give to them that right now my sisters can't give to them. So they worry less. They're more open, they're more vulnerable with me because they don't have to protect me and I don't have to protect them. My lower observation, and when I say lower, I just mean more tactile. As one of you have shared, there is a right space and time and energy in which to have harder discussions. Desha kala vastu. There's a right place, there's a right time, and there's a right energy. I think we always acknowledge the first two, but we don't account for the last one, which is the right energy. If you're very tired, are you going to be more or less compassionate? You're just going to cry. And you're going to make other people cry too then, correct? That's what happens. But if I have the right energy, then I will be more balanced. Sheila and I, we've learned this earlier in our relationship, that whenever I would come back from a lot of traveling and we would have to talk about a matter, it would never go well because I was tired. It was the wrong energy. So now when we have harder discussions, we put our hand up. Meaning I have something that I want to talk to you about. When you're ready, we'll talk about it. Those kinds of practices. Okay? I continue. Another topic of interest is trust and love. How do you rebuild trust with your parent? As a child, it's a given that you love your parents. But adulthood, I may have lost unconditionally loving your parent. How to overcome that, and more importantly, rebuild trust. Very rare is there a child of any age who unconditionally loves their parents. And the same with parents towards their kids. I'm sharing this with you as a parent of 2 kids. The unconditional is only present when there is egolessness. When we were all infants, our parents unconditionally loved us because our ego was dormant. When we became toddlers, children, teenagers, that ego just keeps on expressing more, and with that comes conditions. So this whole idea of unconditional love, let us not be poetic about it. It is the ideal love, but I feel that we've drifted far from that. So my higher observation is your biological parent is not perfect. I most definitely am not a perfect parent, but our original parent is perfect. My biological parents and your biological parents are different, but our original parent is the same. If we love our original parent in an unconditional way, or at least build up to that, build up to loving your original parent unconditionally, you will become the greatest person. Forget about child only. You will become the greatest person where you will feel a oneness with your parents beyond even concepts like trust. Do you trust yourself? Do you trust yourself? I think you do, but you only verbalize that in reference to others, correct? If I'm interacting with someone, I'll say, I trust myself, to try to share a point. It's not every time I turn the car, Vivek, I trust you. I brush my teeth, I trust myself. Because there's a oneness with me. So if I love my original parent, I will feel a oneness with all of the original parents' children, which includes our parents. A lower perspective, simpler practice to this. Focus on the strengths of your parents rather than their weaknesses. I've already stated that every personality, including our parents, are not perfect, but we have a choice to focus on the strengths or the weaknesses. If you focus on the weaknesses, what you're focusing on is what happened. It is past tense, it is regret oriented. But if I focus on the strengths, it is present oriented. There's an opportunity to build there. As an example, when I interact with those who are older than me, Sheila's parents, my parents, your parents, then sometimes when they eat, there's a lot of noises that are made. A lot of licking and slurping and so on. And sometimes when you just want to have a quiet meal, especially me, because my meals are not that quiet, this can be agitating. But I immediately bring in the thought, but they prepared this meal. Suppose I'm at my parents' house for lunch. They paid for this meal. This body is alive because of them in a most factual way. Then all of a sudden, this idea of feeling closer to them becomes natural. We've all become so busy that it's easier to criticize than to compliment. Just think of your default. Is your default to criticize in terms of customer service or compliment? You know the answer. Next. Sibling relationships. How to navigate relationships with siblings, close cousins, as you all grow up, especially if you disagree with each other's life choices. How many of you can relate to this question? I thought I saw one pair of siblings that are gathered. Yeah, there they are. I see them. They're sitting very far apart right now. One sibling so far, they're in a different camera. The higher practice here is your sibling is a seeker, whether they know it or not. They're trying to be joyous. You're trying to be joyous. When you know that, then there's different paths that people pursue to be joyous. So who are you to determine that your path is the best path? When you disagree with them, it's not that you feel like you're wrong. You always feel you're right, correct? I disagree with you. I'm wrong. Whoever thinks that. We feel that our path is the path. However, if we reflect more carefully, that every one of us is designed in a different way, and so we have a different path to be joyous, in which case, whatever you're disagreeing upon becomes less important then, correct? They're simply trying to be happy, especially if they're your sibling or close relationship, where you know that even more so. I don't know so much about my neighbor. Maybe they're not trying to be happy, but you definitely feel that about those who are close to you. A more immediate practice. You don't have to be close to anyone. I find that to be a very old school sentiment. My mother is always telling me, you know, in life, you only have your family. In your life, it will only be you and your sisters. And I listen to her, remember? I told you, I do listen to her. But I don't feel that. I don't follow that. There's so many relationships that I and we have that are legal in nature, but there's no bhava there. There's no feelings there. Do you all agree? Legally, that is a relationship. We may have the same blood type and so on, but there's no feeling there. I'll go to the extent of my father's parents. I hardly got to see them. So how can I have a relationship with them? Agreed? And that doesn't make me a bad person. That's just a fact. They lived in a different hemisphere. They passed away when I was younger. So legally, we're of the same relationship, but functionally, I don't have a relationship with my grandparents in this context. So even with our siblings, certainly you should try to respect them. You should try to love them. You should try to revere them. But if they're choosing to live in a certain way that's not helping you to evolve, it's fine for you not to follow that path. It's fine for you not to convert them. Yes? Just think of one of your siblings or a close cousin. I'm presuming you are less materialistic. I'm presuming they're more materialistic. Fine. Maybe at one point you were that materialistic relative, and now you're just realizing that you can be happier without such materials. You extend this practically to your high school friends. Do you hang out with all of your high school friends? It is okay to outgrow relationships that are not conducive to your evolution. We have to be all right with that. Otherwise, we'll be stuck. Next, serving family with boundaries. It is really easy to take our families for granted. We feel as though we're often making sacrifices in order to make them happy, when in all reality, they may have never asked to be protected or taken care of in the way we do. So how do we ensure that we're doing the best and serving in the best way for our families? What are some precautions to place both yours and their needs at a balance without assuming what's required of you as a family member. And how do we define those boundaries? A higher practice is to become independent. I'm sharing this again and again and again. The greatest gift any relative can give to you is for them to be independent. When I interact with centers, particularly the administrators of centers, the ones that I like to interact with the most are the ones who don't have any problems. Because they're independent. Otherwise, Vivekji, this person's had this, and people aren't doing this, and we need your help here. And that's fine. I will help in those ways, but there's less enjoying that, correct? One is always firefighting. So become independent. Trust yourself. If you don't trust yourself, why would anyone else trust you? The more immediate practice, over communication. The default in every relationship should be over communication, especially when we live in such a digital age, electronic age. If you don't understand something, ask. Share your expectations. Make sure their expectations are shared with you. For all those who have been part of our marriage enrichment retreats, one of the first practices I tell all of you is, on a sheet of paper on one side, write down behaviors that make you happy. On the other side, write down behaviors that make you unhappy. Not of you, but of the people you live with. Then what are you supposed to do with that list? Burn it. No. Give it to that person. So they know more clearly what makes you happy, what makes you unhappy, but there's a list coming to you also, okay? All of these things you do make me unhappy. So over communication. And that's why you observe in all of our programs together, there is an element of discussion and or dialogue. This is never just discourse. Not even meaningful mornings is just discourse. So that we're practicing over communication or clarity. The last of what you had shared in the WhatsApp group in terms of points under interests, generational trauma. Parents of my generation had used guilt to get us to do certain things, and that sort of is hard to unlearn. How do we ensure not to pass this guilt teaching feeling to our kids? How many of you can relate to that? I observe, and this is mostly with our evolving adults, our setukais, that there is a lack of closeness to Sanatana Dharma. And the reason for that is how Sanatana Dharma was taught to you. Now, I want you to think of just math. Is math a bad subject? But if you had a bad teacher, you will feel that math is a bad subject, correct? In a very straightforward way. So all of you who have a lack of closeness towards Sanatana Dharma, please grow up and don't feel that towards Sanatana Dharma, but feel that towards how you've experienced Sanatana Dharma. Just think of our parents in this context, of them forcing rituals, or if you don't do this, this will happen to you. Shani will live in your house forever. Now you're telling me that's all Sanatana Dharma. You're telling me that's positive parenting. These are imperfections in the sharer. Okay. So my higher perspective in all of this, we only operate on what we know. If you don't know, you can't operate from that perspective. As an example, if you ask me to describe a medicine in terms of its pharmacological name or Latin name, I have no idea. I don't even know the difference between Advil and Tylenol. My wife is my physician. I feel this, give me this. So I don't know. So I can't operate from that. I can't tell you what to take because I don't know what to take. So now if we think of our parents, particularly parents who emigrated from Bharat and lived in North America when they were younger. My mother was 20 when she left Bharat and started to live in not even a city like Chicago or Toronto, Niagara Falls. All she knew about Niagara Falls was that Indian people go there. Now she's living here. So what could she have shared with my sisters and I in terms of religion or culture? Because she didn't know. She was 20. Is it her fault? This is her prarabdha, if you want to go that perspective, or she was doing this so that perhaps her children can have more opportunities, which is true. Us going to school was not as competitive as when my parents had to go to school. So now, if you're more sympathetic with your parents, then all of the guilt, the rituals that they forced upon you, that becomes less potent. Agreed? If you know someone's having a bad day, do you take them as seriously? You sympathize they're having a bad day. Whatever they're going to say is not going to be so factual, let it go. A more practical application here is in sharing values, culture, religion with those that you are responsible for. Ensure all of that is meaningful. And if it's not meaningful, don't do it. Ensure it's meaningful. As an example, for many of our prayers or verses, I've translated those into English in a simple way because I feel that the people in my family can appreciate that more. Just think of Brahmarpanam Brahmahavihi. We used to relate to that, but I don't think any of us relate to that anymore. But if we just change the first two teachings to my food is nature, my body is nature, all of a sudden this becomes much more meaningful, correct? So make sure you engage in that which is meaningful. That way, all of the pain that comes with guilt and rituals and so on, you're not inflicting that upon others. You feel this is meaningful and you're creating that meaning for those around you. Okay? There are more observations that are shared, but I want to pause here. Let's see if any of you have any questions that you want to ask verbally. If this is a question you feel is private, you can privately write to me also. I won't read your name out. So if anyone has any questions they want to verbally ask or write to me about, please do so. Three, two. Okay, Archana, go ahead.
Vivekji. In terms of outgrowing relationships that are not conducive to self-development, what happens if that's a relationship with someone in your family and you have to interact with them? Then how do you go about that?
Yeah. How do you outgrow a relationship within one's own family? First perspective is everyone is busy. You may think that this person wants you to interact with them and give more time, but maybe they don't. They're just busy and they're going their own way. I think of like a typical teenager, they don't need so much of their parents' time. Parents want to spend time with their teenagers. Their teenagers do not want to spend time with their parents. So make sure you're clear about, do you have to associate with that family member so much? Next is, and this is such an important and easy practice for all of us. Every facet of life, and certainly relationships, quality time is felt more deeply than quantity time. So now if you think of a family member, Archana, let's just say it's your brother. I don't know if you have a brother, etc. Suppose your brother, you feel you have to be with him all the time, but you selectively choose when to be with him. But when you are with him, you are there. You are listening, you are leading, you are loving, you are not distracted, you're not on social media. He will feel that deeply and will not need more of your time, in which case you can keep growing in the direction you want. Make sense? It's almost like renewing your license plate. You just have to do it. But then you drive for a few years, correct? But you have to do it, so do it. There's no point in procrastinating or complaining about that. I'm taking up a private question. How can we forgive our parents in homes where abuse, violence has affected us and continue relationships without resentment? Firstly, I sympathize with you, but I cannot empathize with you because I've not grown up in such an environment. And so I don't want to pretend like I know what you're going through, because I don't. The higher perspective is someone who inflicts violence on another. They're coming from a place of feeling insecure. The most violent are the most insecure. There's a smallness inside, so they try to make others smaller for them to feel bigger, like Ravana. So with that one insight, if a parent has abused or been violent with me, that one insight, it makes me feel more sympathy for them. Imagine how hard their life must have been or how awful they must be feeling. A more immediate practice is for you to communicate in very overt terms what they have made you feel. This will be good for you, undoubtedly. I've already stated that we're social. We want to share especially that which is important. Share with them. This may not happen in one sitting. It may happen in 10 sittings. It may have to be through writing. It may have to be through a mediator, a therapist, whatever it may be. But share this with them for your benefit and for them too. I observe with some of our families, our parents, they are indirectly racist. And I'm pointing out indirectly here. Sometimes they don't know that they're being racist. And so what should someone who's more socially vigilant do? Communicate that to them in different ways. They may not get it. What do you mean this is racist? So you communicate that to them in different ways for them to hopefully finally understand for their own development. Okay. Next, private. How do you create more trust amongst husband and wife when both are studying Vedanta, but are unwilling to accept the other's insights in discussion application? This goes both ways. This is a tough experience. Those who study Vedanta always feel they're right. I'm right in my observation about this being right. And now if two people are studying Vedanta and it's not mature enough, then there's, I'm right, you're wrong. It's never, we're both trying to be right here. So the higher perspective is, and I had shared this in our Thursday class, for those in that class, You have a choice to make to either prioritize Atma or Ahangara. Atma means joy. Ahangara means ego. If I'm disagreeing with you, I feel I'm right or you're wrong, I have a choice. Do I want to be happy, and in this case, you happy too? Or do I want to feel that I'm right? We should prioritize that happiness, in which case, even if you're right, and that person is stating that they're right, let it go. If they're a seeker, finally they will come to appreciate what is right and wrong. Let it go. In the movie The Peaceful Warrior, there's a point where Dan feels he's right and Socrates is wrong. And what does Socrates do? Just lets it go. And Dan finally comes to understand and appreciate that he was wrong, that Socrates was right. But he couldn't do anything in that moment. The more practical application is date night. I cannot emphasize enough how important date night is with two sets of people. Number one, yourself. Every week, I go out on a date with myself. Last night's date took me for a walk to see Ghostbusters and eat at Taco Bell. It was intimate. It was beautiful. It was enjoyable. It was very cheap. Date yourself, because in doing so, you trust yourself more so you can trust others. Next is with your family members. Here, when I share date night, everyone's thinking about this romantically, rom-com and so on. I mean in a focused way. If you go to a restaurant, there's no dishes. You can't speak as loud. There's no free Wi-Fi other than on your phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My point is that you're focused on communing with each other. Family walks or family road trips. That's what my parents used to do, is lock us in the car and drive us to Florida multiple times a year. That's 24 hours of driving. But I remember those road trips. We had no choice but to speak to each other, speak to my parents. Next, how do I bond with a family member who is authoritative? However, I know their beliefs aren't the same as mine. Worse, when I feel my beliefs are right, this conflict I have is, do I assert my belief as it's my responsibility, or just let it go as I have a higher perspective? The same sentiments as the previous question. All of us have to start orienting ourselves towards right is might. Might is not right. That is a very capitalistic American sentiment, that right is might. I'm sorry, that might is right. That might is right. Right is might. Here, right doesn't have to be established externally. If you always have to establish your right externally, you have to document everything, take pictures of everything, record everything. But if right means Atma, humility, oneness, then we're far quicker and more natural in letting it go then, correct? Okay. I wanted us to have a discussion. I don't think we're going to have time for that, so I'm going to keep going with questions. Is that okay? Okay. All questions have shifted into private now. How to reframe what it means to be close in a sibling relationship when there are expectations. The higher perspective is, many of you, I'm sharing this because you've told me about this, you've asked me about this. What brings you down is you reflecting on how you once were. It could be a relationship. I was so close to my brother 15 years ago, and now I'm not. Or it can be with yourself. I used to be much more cheerful, and now I complain more. Do you do that? I think so. And so this is self-criticism. Self-criticism is productive as long as you're growing towards your best self. But if that self-criticism is not helping you to grow, then it is self-destructive. So now when you think of a relationship with a sibling, rewind 10 years ago when you were very close. Now 10 years later, you're not. If you want to be close with them and you're putting in the effort to do so, good. But if you're putting in that effort, but that closeness is not developing, good. It's not meant to be. It's okay. If you think of a typical trajectory, people are working in different places, people are interacting with different relationships. How can it be the same when everyone was living together in the same home? It can't be the same. That is a very Bollywood sentiment where everyone's living together in the same home and so on. Amitabh Bachchan is not living in your home, okay? A more practical application towards this is to schedule time with your siblings. Sibling. Schedule it though. That once a week at this time, we will FaceTime. Or once a month, the last weekend, you'll get together in this mutual location. The regular meetings help to nurture sincerity. This is such a simple practice just in terms of contemplation. If you contemplate in the same place and time every day, every time you go into that place, your mind will naturally become more quiet because it feels you're in this place now, correct? When you get water in your nose, what do you remember? Swimming, right? Swimming as a child in some sort of pool. It automatically takes you there. If it's just me, all of you don't seem to have this passionate experience of water in your nose like I do. So that water in my nose naturally brings my mind to a swimming pool. So if this regular meeting is there, one will be more sincere with their sibling. Okay, there's so many questions. So I'm only going to take one more during this workshop. Then if you want to stick around, I can answer more. How do I know, I'm not sure if you're referring to you or to me, that I have extended enough help to support a family member who is going through a tough time and withdraw myself surrendering to God instead of thinking of it over and over? If we have a family member who's going through a tough time, the best thing we can do for them is to become independent. I'm not sharing this because I can't think of another answer. This is the answer. The greatest gift you can give to another is to reduce their vasanas. I can send you an Amazon gift card. I can babysit your parents or your child, but in terms of effort, all you can do to help another person become more evolved is your own evolution. Those who get enlightened reduce the vasanas of all of humanity. That is the humanitarian work. So get enlightened. That is my higher perspective for everything. This workshop and all workshops. More practically, use time as a parameter. If your family member is going through a tough time, you analyze your schedule, see how much time you can give to them. That time should be of a quality time, though. You're there. And that you should feel as your best. Once you feel that this is the best you can do for a family member, you will let go. You will let God. Make sense? it's as simple as when centers invite me to come and teach, I give them 4 days. That's it. This is my time parameter. This is my best for you. If I give you less, I won't feel good about it. If I give you more, it's taking me away from other responsibilities I have. So Vivek is very clear. This is my time parameter. If I'm doing my best for this center, and I let go then. I continue to the next responsibility. 1, 2, 3. There are 3 more questions which I will take after I formally complete this workshop. A very brief review, then very brief announcements. This workshop is entitled Circle of Trust, Family Relationships. The Sanskrit word for family is sambandha. Bandha means to bind, sam means well. It is your relationship with another that can bind you to sadness or bind you to happiness. Sambandha can swing both ways. Yes? I remember going to the Chinmay Mission Flint Center, and I was reading the poster they had made for me to come there. And on this poster, it said, Vivekji has been visiting Flint for the past 5 years. He's developed a great bondage with the people here. You may feel that bondage, but I've not developed any bondage with you. So my point here is you have to trust yourself. We always think of circles of trust being outside, but if you trust yourself, you will trust others, and even if they're disloyal, you will still be samabuddhi. You will still be balanced. And that's what Bhagavan Krishna teaches. Chapter 6, verse 9. In a simplified form, listen, lead, love. Then I went through a series of questions. The higher one is always be independent. And the lower one is managing your communication. Sometimes to be more communicative, sometimes to be less communicative in the sense of let it go. Shifting over to announcements. November 29th, we begin the happiness series. I'm actively requesting all of you to actively invite a seeker to be part of the happiness series. What is going to be very cool about this is we're going to have a workshop on space management, time management, and matter management too. Desha, Kala, Vastu, so that our lifestyles are more managed, more happy. Be part of that. That's the 29th to the 2nd. Next is our final workshop for 2021, I believe, is on December 19th, unless our team decides it's on December 12th. But right now, the plan is for this to be on December 19th. And this is going to be a celebration. The completion of 1 year of our wellness mentorship program. I don't like this program. I love this program. I feel the potential for this program is 10 times what we're tapping into now. And so I have a lot of ideas and people connected to these ideas that we're going to begin to implement in 2022. Like a new facet of this program will be where our Setukaris, our Yuvekendra, will commune with those who are Vanaprasthas, those who are older. And what will you do with them? Listen. On a regular basis, to listen to our aunties, to our uncles, to our grandparents, and so on. So be part of the completion of our celebration. Many details about planning for our next year will be shared, including whether you're going to continue on in this program, whether you want to take a more active role in this program, and so on. So there'll be a survey, there will be interaction, and so on. That's all. I'm going to formally complete the workshop, and I will stay on for 10 more minutes. And I will answer the 3 questions that have been asked of me privately. If you wish to stay, good. If you don't wish to stay, good. Unilateral, sama buddhi, no expectations. See all of it being played out. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Be safe, be sound, be serene, be happiness. Okay. Here is the next private question. For many of us, our parents, their experience during our childhood was somewhat stressful, hectic. Household obligations, professional commitments, distances from family in India. As a result, function, achievement, progress were valued. How do you learn to talk about emotions? How do you pivot conversations about happiness rather than success? How many of you can relate to this? A higher perspective is sympathy. I'm directly speaking about my parents, and I'm sure it applies to your parents too. When my parents moved to Canada, they had to work to survive. It wasn't to succeed, it was to survive. I have so many stories that my parents have told me about how they made a mistake and $20 were wasted, and that there was tears for a week because they didn't have access to $20. Where was that $20 going to come from? So they had to work to survive. $20 for us is what? That means nothing. That's a trip to Starbucks, correct? But that's the luxury that we now have, that we don't have to live to survive. We can live to thrive, which is happiness, correct? Nobody here, even if you do nothing for the rest of your life, I don't think you'll have to worry so much about where you're going to eat or how you're going to eat. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all of those bottom parts are checked off already. Belonging is checked off. Now we have to work on our own self-esteem so that we can reach self-actualization. So enough of continuing to invest in the bottom pillars when they're already full. It's like me making my basement so awesome when there's no ground floor. Guys, come check this foundation out. It's awesome. But nobody can live there. So that is my first point, is to sympathize. That was their circumstance. Your circumstance is different. Next is for all of us to be more expressive about how happy you are. None of our parents think we're happy. That's the big problem. If our parents thought we were happy, then they wouldn't talk so much about success or do you know what this person's doing or that person's doing, correct? If I ask all of you, why do you go to work? I go to work to buy something. Why do you want to buy something? Finally, you're going to say to be happy. What if I ask you, why do you go to work? And you say to be happy? Then what am I going to say? Nothing, because it finally comes down to happiness, correct? So we have to be more expressive of our happiness. Next, how does one make amends to a child who has PTSD and refuses to take help from her parents because she feels the parents were not nice to her and she locks away herself without communication? The higher perspective here is to solicit and facilitate professional help. There are many, many, many professionals just in this workshop in terms of healthcare, whether as counselors, therapists, psychiatrists, etc. Seek professional help. Because if you're clinically diagnosing your child with PTSD, then there has to be clinical support for that too. This openness in our community needs improvement. We have to talk about it more. Like if I need this, I should talk about it more. If I can offer this, I should talk about it more. What I wanted us to do in our discussion, and maybe you can just do this by yourself then, is for you to share, and we were going to do groups of, let's say 6, for you to share a difficulty that you're having in a relationship, a close relationship, and why. So suppose my father and I are arguing, I would have to tell you, a difficulty I'm having is with my father, but then I have to state why. And the purpose of such a discussion is to be more open. If we're closed, it's almost like Prince Arjuna denying that he needs help. And as long as he denies that, Bhagavan Krishna never teaches. When he opens up that he does need help, that's when Bhagavad Gita begins, the teaching. So seek professional help. And you all know in our program, we have Rachana, who is a pediatrician who also focuses on working with youth in terms of their mental health. We have such advisors, we have such resources. So professional help. The lower application is to try to communicate to your child that you made mistakes. Remember I shared in one of the classes, what adults don't say is, I don't know. Do you remember we brought that up? Adults don't say it, kids always say it. And relatedly, adults admitting that they made mistakes. Sharing that one has made a mistake, and then you can describe that I was going through this when I was younger, so maybe this is why I said this to you. Maybe this is why I treated you like this. And that's not to say that it was okay, but this is a methodology to grow forward. So sharing that you've made a mistake, why that mistake is made, how it's making you feel, will help that child to be more open to what they experienced, and they will become more open to try to grow out of that also. Next and final question. I've heard during various discourses that after a certain age, we should move to have more of a friendship with our parents. How can we cultivate more of that friend relationship with parents as a CSK? That age that you're referring to is 15. When a child is a teenager, they're around the age of 15. At that time, parents have to evolve to become friends instead of just parents. So more openness is needed. And just think, when you're in high school, who influenced you the most? It wasn't your parents, it was your friends. If you had good friends, high school was awesome. If you had negative friends, you wanted to forget high school. It was a very make or break circumstance. So if parents can become friendly, then they will be more influential in a child's life. Now, how can you become more friendly with your parents? The first is to listen more. And here, listening is not just with your ears, to be more present. Every generation thinks that the next generation is more distracted. Agreed? But it's true. So our parents are not used to this idea of someone not being present. I remember Puja Swami Tejovananda saying, do you want to come to my party? He was saying it so casually. Do you want to come to my party where everyone's going to be ignoring each other? That's what happens at parties, right? We all go to the same place, but everyone's distracted. So be present. Listen and be present. This will help you to relate to your parents more. I feel that our parents know way more about us than we think. So if we listen more, we'll come to realize they were kids once too. Secondly is to be with them outside of your home. Go for walks with them, go mini putting with them, go to the movies with them outside of the home, because at home, their mind will always be on stuff that has to be done at home. Like with my mother particularly, if we're at home, she's going to want to cook something and feed us. Because if you don't eat a lot, you're a sick person. So if we leave the house, then all of a sudden she loses her power. But then we can focus more on our relationship. How are you doing? And so on and so forth. So those kinds of activities. Okay. We should do this more often. And we will try to do this more often because I feel that everyone has many more questions. Like even the list that was shared, I didn't get through all of them. Our team will plan for this. Okay. Everyone be well. Hari Om.